大家好，欢迎收听可持续对话，我是主播邢哲明。可持续对话，让对话可持续。本期节目我们非常荣幸地邀请到了 Toby ESG 先生。Toby 是我的好朋友，他是一位全球慈善公益和公关领域的领军人物。他著有书籍《善经济：如何以企业社会责任制胜》，并正主持一档以善经济为题的英文播客节目。在超过200次的对谈中，访问了诸多世界500强企业的 ESG 行业顶级专家。他曾经是佳士得艺术集团200余年历史中第一位首席企业社会责任官，也曾以总监的身份经手美国运通公司、纽约时报等知名企业的传播事务。本期节目是可持续对话第一次使用全英文来进行对话，也是跟 The Caring Economy Podcast 的一次串台节目。欢迎大家收听。
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all of my podcast followers. Today I have the privilege of having my friend from New York, Toby ESG, I want to use the word legendary, and also a role model of the business. We know each other during my years in New York City, and Toby has been an inspiration of my career, of my entrepreneurship, and also on my ESG journey. So today I have this great pleasure of having Toby to join our podcast, Dialogues on Sustainability. And Toby will be the first English-speaking guest on our show, and I will be so happy to have him to say hi to our followers. Hi, Toby. Can you say hi to our followers and give us a bit of introduction of yourself?
Sure. Ni hao. And thank you, Ziming. Everything you say, I throw right back at you. You've been a great friend and colleague. We met first professionally in New York and have remained friends and colleagues and collaborators ever since. But the good news is we've also been able to grow together as friends, even with the great oceans between us and COVID and all these other challenges. So what you want me to give a quick overview of my career or my life story? What's best for you?
I think let's get started with your remarkable journey across public relations and corporate responsibility. So, sure. Toby, can you share what first drew you into this space? Where did you get your career started?
So this is a perfect example of our relationship, my friend Jermaine, because I grew up in a middle-class Midwestern family here in the United States, and I was always, to this day, fascinated by the international, by the other. I love my country. I'm proud of my country. I love my family and friends, but I always wanted to get out and see the world, see others, engage with the other, understand. And that drives me to this day. So that international drive is what has really, from my earliest days in high school and in college and after, focused on international living, work, and study. So I started out backpacking in Europe as a kid in high school with my money from McDonald's. I went on to undergraduate school in a liberal arts program where I did study abroad in Vienna and in Paris and shaped a bit of an international relations degree. And then went on to graduate school in university administration and international academic exchange because I saw the power of living, working, studying abroad, and I believed in it, and I had a passion for it. So I was working on a PhD program at Columbia at the time. I had a Fulbright grant and went to Belgium to do research on a really genius program called Erasmus. They took the great scholar Erasmus and used his name as an acronym for the European Action Scheme for the Mobility of University Students to foster a sense of European identity, cultural identity, to take the European Union beyond just being a commercial relationship. So instead of a French or Italian student, you would go and study in another EU country, but then you identified as a European versus Italian, French, whatever. That program is still around and very successful. And so when I came back from all that dissertation research at Columbia, I thought, I'm going to be in school forever. So I thought, I'm nearing 30. I need to get some kind of salary. So long story short, I started working with an executive recruiter friend of mine who placed people in financial services, John Mazzy. And he sent me out on some interviews to do public relations, corporate affairs, public affairs with major brands. I ended up at American Express, where I spent 5 years as a director of public affairs, and I rose and became director of international public affairs. So I became sort of the right hand of the woman who headed up all the non-U.S. public relations, public affairs for American Express. I was in heaven. I was working around the world with colleagues from around the world, but also, Zaming, you can appreciate this given your experience at HNA or even CCTV. I was working with one of the greatest brands, the American Express brand, 150 years old. And boy, oh boy, did I get a great education in what corporate communications, public affairs, public relations is. And it wasn't just like how to write a press release. It was how to tell a story, how to land a story, how to help make news where there isn't news, and how to be able to always deal in truth, but take it in a way where you can meet the journalists with the questions they have. And I'm talking really tough journalists from the Wall Street Journal who want like the numbers, the financial stuff, and you can't sugarcoat it. But boy, I got the best training there. And I have to this day people in my life from that time. And then that was how the die was cast. And I can tell you more, but I basically went from there to other sectors, always in the communications role, in a senior role, if not the top role. But I'm happy to say always at great global brands. And it's been a joy.
And of course, after the American Express, you also work with one of the most prestigious media brand within the world, which is New York Times. You work at a PR function at New York Times, right?
Yep, that's true. But and I'll talk to that. But let me just say, and it's on my CV, it's not a surprise, but I left American Express to run the head of communications for a digital startup called a digital consultancy called Razorfish. And for 2 years, I ran communications globally. And that was exciting to me as today with AI. I'm not a tech person, but I am fascinated by technology. I embrace it. I know that it's not going to go away. And so I throw myself into it. So it was exciting for me to leave financial services and a great brand like American Express to go to Razorfish. And I was there for almost 2 years. And then the dot-com bust happened, and the second wave I was out. And that's when I went to the New York Times. My friends at Korn Ferry, the recruiter firm, I thank to this day, they sent me there, and I ended up there for 5 years. And that was exciting because, as you say, it's a great storied brand and the paper of record. And you can appreciate this, Jiming. I don't know about all your listeners, but well, I would never wish a crisis on someone. Boy, did I get baptism under fire, because the New York Times, you're always, always, always under attack. We had 9/11, 2 months into my start there, we had 9/11. We were the hometown paper covering it. We had the Jason Blair plagiarism scandal, which almost took down the paper. We had the run up to the war in Iraq. I mean, we were constantly on not on the defensive, but it was reactive. But you know what? It's great training with world-class journalists and editors. And then conversely, I was recruited to go to Christie's auction house and run what became 10 years, a luxury art and auction brand. And that was the reactive. I mean, that was not reactive, that was proactive. So it's all good. But I've always loved moving through different ecosystems. To go from financial services to publishing, tech to luxury has been a great adventure for me. Always landing stories, celebrating a brand, building it globally across different time zones. It's a fascinating exercise that you've done so well and you can relate to, I assume.
I cannot imagine a better life or a better career path compared with you, because, sometimes working with this renowned international brand brings a great platform for personal growth, but also the scale of the challenges or the scale of the crisis that we'll deal with literally on a daily basis is something unimaginable for many people. So I think, working with New York Times, American Express, they are international, they are great platforms. And also you landed on Christie's, and you initiated this kind of philanthropy plus art plus charity initiative, and you are the first chief CSR officer within the organization, and you led international efforts to make this happen. Tell us more about this. I'm very curious, and I think my followers are very curious about this as well.
Well, so two thoughts. One is because you and I have worked, you were of media and then you work in media relations. Before there was social media, we were on call 24/7. The journalists had our numbers. Then we had pagers and beepers. Then we had cell phones, but we've always been on. So I think in a certain sense, we were prepped before there were cell phones and iPhones. We were prepped to engage and be on 24/7, and we found a work-life balance there, which I think in retrospect has really benefited us. And it's the same thing with the CSR. You ask about Christie's, I'll tell you, it was one of the most joyful chapters in my life, 10 years there. But the CSR, the corporate social responsibility, in a certain sense, it happened by accident because that's what where the times were. I'll take a little credit because the way I was raised and the way I think about brand building, I mean, all great brands, when you're HNA or CCTV, your own brand now, great brands are built from the inside out, and you can't just be transactional. You have to think about all the stakeholders, and well, you don't have to, but I advise people to think about all stakeholders involved and how are you engaging with them and what's your story and what's your purpose, right? So the way I was oriented, and American Express reinforced it, the New York Times reinforced, these are great brands with great leadership. It was just further reinforced in me that this is what great brands do. So for example, when I got to Christie's selling art and antiquities, there's so much more to that story because ultimately I really believe to my core that Christie's plays, for its 250 years, has always played a key role in cultural stewardship. This is not IKEA, throw it out. It's not fast fashion. It is about buy quality, buy something that has provenance, buy something that is worth preserving and passing on to the next generation. And that sense of stewardship, I've written op-eds for Women's Wear Daily about this, saying like, we were the original recyclers, right? 250 years ago, we say, you know, buy it, cherish it. And when it's time, whether it's divorce, death, whatever, steward it along and let Christie's help you with it. So I felt when I landed there, I was in my own family in a sense. And what I also realized, Yiming, and that's where I'll take a little bit of credit, was what became the CSR program we call Art and Soul, was really coming out of the creation I had of a green auction. We call it the bid to save the earth, because climate destruction is happening, still is happening. And I knew that we had a lot of our major collectors and a lot of our employees and stakeholders who cared about it. So what do you do as an art and auction house? And what we did was we created a charity auction. We made a 3-year commitment to 4 different environmental groups of great rapport or renown. It was Conservation International, Oceana, Central Park Conservancy, and Natural Resources Defense Council. And we committed to pulling together our resources to benefit all 4 organizations over 3 years with an annual charity auction. And boy, did we bring in the celebrity, we brought in the donations, we raised the money, we had fun. Honestly, that was also what brought certain collections into Christie's when people died and estates happened. And that piece, the purpose piece, our clients cared about more than just the artwork, right? They have their lives, their concerns. And so the bid to save the earth was very successful. And that was when my then CEO said, why don't we build this into something? Why don't you run and build this CSR program, which I did. And I did it in collaboration with my colleagues. And I mean, it sent me far and wide. I was working with the Vatican at one point. I had a meeting with Pope Francis. I mean, it was, you go big or you go home, basically.
Yeah.
But think about the caliber of the artworks and the clientele we're working with and the cause, the purpose. Why settle for anything less? And it was a great joy. I built it with my colleagues. And that's how the CSR came to Christie's, Art and Soul.
Yeah, that's rewarding, and also that's very challenging. As you say that, you know, the good brands happen within the organization. So sometimes we always need someone to at least to break the role or make one more step forward to make everything happen. And I think leadership support is also a very important factor in this to make this happen.
I mean, my CEO supported me, but let me give you 2 examples of where I think it's actually it's work, but it's joyful work, right? So one, the way I position this to all my colleagues is I want every one of my employees to be seen as the hero in the narrative. So when you turn to your colleagues and say, you are great, you can volunteer at this cultural organization and change a life, you have the potential to be on boards and do all these things, you're giving you're not a threat to them. You're not asking them for anything. You're making them the hero, so they're not against you. You're not asking for money or time. But what you're doing is you're also giving them the opportunity to take their teams, who I met with regularly, to do leadership development skills, because you can't give every employee a raise and a promotion or a new role every year, right? So volunteerism is so much more than check the box if it's done well.
Yeah.
You can really let people grow and find their own ways. The second example, which is fun, is I think that people say how, yeah, money is the problem all the time. And I don't believe that. I think it's leadership and creativity. With art and soul, as an example, I think you just need creative thinking and collaboration. So when we introduced this volunteer fair concept across our three major hubs, Hong Kong, London, and New York, and in Paris as well. And what we did was we brought in the staff or executive directors of arts and cultural nonprofits in our communities. And we let them do like speed dating, almost like a fair atmosphere. And we had this whole festival atmosphere. We brought in food. We had feed. We had the mayor for culture come in and introduce it, open up. Arts assembly. We call it the arts assembly. Like you go to school in the morning, you have your assembly. And we got everyone to come down, have some food, and do a little like meet all the different organizations, maybe volunteer, check it out. We had music from one of the nonprofits. But the thing is, not everyone is always in the office, right? So for like $25 globally, I went and my colleague and we bought prepackaged individual lifesaver candies. And we put little rainbow colored notes that said, be a lifesaver, come down to the arts assembly. And for those people who weren't in the office, we put those little candies on their keyboard. You know what? It cost nothing, but we did it across the world. We broke through the clutter. How many emails do people not get to or care about?
Yeah.
But at least draws the curiosity. It was creative. It was fun. So food sells sometimes.
Yeah. So I think, you are the empowerer, or you empower your colleagues, and also you always go-to person. I think that is part of the magic of doing PR and CSR, is because, I think the PR people are actually sitting on the seat of the chairman or the board or the C-suite executives. So basically, for all of our colleagues in each and individual function, they usually don't think out of the box. But when a PR person steps in, they always think, okay, you are literally opening my eyes, and this can be done this way. You are inspirational to your colleagues, you are empowering your colleagues. And sometimes, we always need a negotiator or a facilitator of the conversation. And I think the PR role is the perfect one within the organization to do so.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you. I think some of our colleagues would be insulted by this, but this is a worldview I have about corporate communications and PR. I think that we are the modern day court jesters. And think about the court jesters, the king's the king, that's the CEO. The nobles are who they are. But the court jester always has to play the fool, look stupid, maybe, be entertaining, but they have to keep things moving, and they know where power lies, and they get things done. And they have fun, right? So I think with life in general, but even communications, people will always remember how you made them feel. Do I feel respected?
Yeah.
Did I get my question heard? Was it answered? Do I trust this person who's my interpreter, the king or the CEO of me? So I think that the modern day court jester is not a bad one, but some of my colleagues might think that, or our colleagues might think that that's a bit insulting. But whatever your metaphor is or model, I just think that we need to come with solutions, not complaints. I will never, my husband, who Harlan taught me a great expression because he's from South Texas, and he would say, like pigeons and birds, you can't swoop down and poop and leave. So no swoop and poop. If you want to complain, you can't complain unless you come with a suggested solution.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in companies, in politics, in our worlds right now who complain, and they have a platform with social media, but to what end? And I really try regularly to ask anyone and everyone, so what's your suggestion? What's your solution? Nobody has ever cornered the market on good ideas, particularly with young people right now, Jermaine. And I would also say, as someone who's very involved with AI and teaching about it and promoting it, AI is our technology that can make it even greater for us as communicators, as creators, as problem solvers, as educators, as coaches and mentors for the next generations of leaders. I'm dumbstruck at how many people are not taking up that opportunity. But that's why I keep teaching these courses. I taught 56 nonprofits today about it because they don't have the budget. They need the solutions. They need the creativity. And so I'm very optimistic. I think that all the problems and challenges facing brands and companies and countries right now, we can solve it. We're up to it with the right leadership and leveraging the resources and technology we have.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think, for a PR person within an organization or even as an agency role, I think sometimes we work as diplomats, we work as deal makers, and sometimes we are dictators. Because, there is a deadline, there is a objective, there is a limited budget, and there are so many people pitching in their ideas. There's always need to be someone to be the bitch of the table. I have to make sure that, before we go into depth, I have to be a bitch at the very beginning, because in order to make this happen, I need to, assume this role, which I don't like, but sometimes being a dictator / a diplomat / a deal maker is something that I see a PR role within a organization. And that brings another thing is basically I was on a podcast in Chinese language, and the host asked me one question. So basically, how can you describe your role as a PR to people who are not in the business? I said, I only have 3 roles. First role is actually I'm a super connector, because I connect people from different communities, from different, initiatives, from different places of the world, from different sectors, industries, to at least sit down and engage with each other. That's my first role. Mm-hmm. And my second role is actually I'm a big translator / interpreter, because sometimes your words, your narratives are not being understood by another community. So my job is I understand your intention. I know what you mean by yourself, but how can you make this conversation going? How can you make engagement into a higher and elevated level of relationship? That is something I do on a daily basis. I help organizations tell their stories in a way that is more understandable, more timely, and more, interesting, newsworthy. And the third role is actually I'm a big firefighter. I'm a super firefighter. Not only that I help with you control the fire, save the people, and on the rescue mission, and my job is on a daily basis to identify the risks that might cause a fire. So, daily routines of checkups and also talk with the community and identify issues. That is something a firefighter should be doing on a daily basis. So I think, after I pitch in these ideas of the 3 roles for a PR, and they say, okay, I understand what you do. Basically, you do everything. And your role is very important within an organization.
So I love that. I agree more, but I'm going to pay you a compliment. One with a comment and one with my answer. So the compliment is, I always tell people the most attractive thing you can wear on a dance floor, at a party, whatever, is a smile. And when you do what you just described, the firefighter, the translator, you do it with a smile, right? And that's not disingenuous. It's not a lie. You're genuinely doing it, but people will want to be with the person who is smiling and looking at them, the eye contact. So I think that we do all those things you described as professional communicators with, I think, poise and smile. We don't do it mean or vindictive, and you can say, you're the bitch sometimes, but I'm sure even when you are that person, which I don't know you to be that person, you do it with a glove, a soft way.
Yeah.
But my answer to that question your colleague posed to you, and I really believe this in my core about you, I believe it about me, and I believe it about our peers in communications, but also I believe it about leaders, Jiming, because we're all leaders. If asked, what do you do? What's your job? I say, I'm the answer.
Yeah, I'm not part of the questions, but I'm the solution provider.
But then that invites them to say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, give me what's the question? So if they want an interpreter, great. If they want a litigator, great. If they want a fixer, great. If they want a crisis comms person, great. But you and I both know, particularly if we had the good fortune and worked hard to live and study abroad, we understand different cultures and we thrive in that. That's where we get our energy. That's where we have a gift to apply. But
Yeah.
I believe strongly for you and for me, we have our tough days, but we know how lucky we are to be doing what we're
Yeah.
doing. So it's an adventure, right? Like you talk about the young people, whoever you have to deal with, bring down the hammer at work, but I think you approach each day as I do with it. Oh, it's an adventure. Like
Yeah.
also because you deal with enough crisis communications, you know right away, oh, it's not a crisis, right? It's just an issues management because in truth, there are elements, right? You know the who, what, when, where, how, the questions to ask. You get more comfortable drinking from a fire hose or working with firefighting because you've been around it. I don't wish
Mm.
crises on other people, but you and I both know that's the most interesting work we ever do. Truly.
Yeah, of course. And also for crisis, when there is a crisis, there is an opportunity. And why is that? Because the Chinese translation or the Chinese way of saying a crisis is called 危机. Wei means a crisis or a danger, but ji means opportunity.
Yeah.
So, within the Chinese philosophy, a crisis always brings a opportunity.
We say that too. And
Sometimes
crisis is a terrible thing to waste.
yeah, so I think that's very interesting because you've worked your entire way in the PR, and I think we are always a initiator within the organization. The PR folks are actually the initiators of all those fun CSR programs because we understand about the communities, we understand about issues. We need what resources we can leverage, not necessarily the cash donations or anything, but there are resources that can be leveraged because of the power of communication, of negotiation, about having a win-win situation presented in front of other people. So I think I think after we met each other, I think before I moved out of New York City, we had a very interesting meeting. Is actually you were working on your books, and 1 year later you have your English book published, and then I think during the very early stage of the pandemic you have your Chinese book
Yes, thanks for
translated and
moving. Yeah.
published here.
Your colleague, you set me up for my translator.
Yes, I think one question I want to ask you is that what brings you to actually to write down a book actually combining CSR, sustainability, ESG, and all those elements and put together into a theme that is called the caring economy.
Yeah, well, I mean the pat response is that I had something to say, right? We all have something to say, but I think the answer is kind of why I also am throwing myself into AI right now, and why, excuse me, I've written another book more recently called Connecting the Dots, about how we build our networks, but also our legacy, like to what end. So I'm always fascinated with the limited amount of time I have on this planet. I know how precious it is. I've lost friends and family. I know that there's, I know how it ends, so to speak. So what am I doing with that? What's my impact? People have helped me. I've been inspired. I feel a sense of, I mean, not to be overly romantic, but I really know in my core that we are all on this planet as unique individuals and we all meant to serve and to serve a higher purpose, something bigger than ourselves. And so I live it and breathe it, and I try to catalyze that in others as it's been done with me and the great brands I've worked with. All these great brands, they understand that's a part of leadership. It's of service to something bigger and higher. And for those brands that don't really do it authentically, people are right. They're greenwashing. And so this whole blowback right now against
Mm,
ESG and DE&I and called alphabet soup, I don't even take the bait on that, Jiming, because I know that
mm,
leaders will always stay true to their mission and their values, and their employees know it. Do we put our head above the parapet? Maybe not right now, or maybe we don't. But the thing is, we're not changing our values. Great brands are not, and great leaders are not changing their brand
mm.
values or their mission. They're getting on with it. So I salute you for staying focused on ESG when I don't know how it is in China as much as here right now, but the blowback is strong and significant, and I don't, it doesn't matter to me because I'm going to keep on being who I am and working with the brands and the people I do and seeing in others that same recognition that this is what matters. This is what great
Mm.
brands do. This is what great leaders do. This is what I'm meant to do. And the best part of it, the most fun and satisfying part of it, and I don't mean to sound arrogant, is I don't need to be proven right. I
Mm,
know from my values, the way I was raised, it's not even a faith-driven thing, it's more family. I think that much of what I live and breathe and do today was actually formed with my family when I was a kid. We learned how to be of service to others. And the great brands I've worked with have done the same. They've reinforced it. You've obviously had a similar experience. So we don't need to be proven right here, even though the times and the political stuff and the wars, all this stuff give people pause for doubt. I get that. But
mm,
that's when I say all the more reason we need to lean in and do more now. We need to leverage the technology. We need to have conversations like you are facilitating today, right? US-China relationships have gone up and down, but our friendship for probably nearly a decade now, I think,
yeah.
it's steadfast. And that is what matters, the person-to-person contact, the purpose, the bridge building, the curiosity and understanding. Great brands do that. Great leaders do that. So uh, I'm more inspired than ever. And that's before you add in
Mm,
AI. That's before you
yeah.
give these kids a chance to really contribute. And I know
Yeah.
that there are. I've got examples of ones I'm working with now, young college kids who are helping me with social media stuff to protect America's public lands. I mean, the kids, they're stepping up. And I'm sure it's the
Yeah,
same
of
in
course.
China.
Yeah, talking about China, I think, although we see this kind of global blowbacks on ESG topics, and especially some of the financial institutions that are actually stepping back from this kind of concepts, because I think there is general other pressures as well. But what I see is actually these are hiccups. Actually, they're not big issues compared with people who care. Because 21 years ago, when UNGC proposed this ESG idea, the book that they published is called Who Cares Wins, right? So basically, who can win eventually, or win a war against themselves, because I think evolution is the only way forward. A lot of great brands, great companies are actually shifting their business focus and priorities strategically for a couple of times, because the society evolves, the history moves forward. So basically, I think, as long as we stay true to the issues and we follow the trend of history, I think, a lot of issues will be resolved. And my thing is, here in China on ESG, we have this joke. Basically, it falls on both the community of podcasts and also the community of ESG people. We say that this is the first year of podcast and first year of ESG on a yearly basis. Because, for ESG, it started with a very small group of people who cares extremely about this planet. And also for podcasts, because it's not mass media, people are not, adjusted to listen to this comprehensive and
Yeah.
in-depth conversations. So basically, on a yearly basis, there are more people joining in, and people who are already within the community has this obligation of telling the story in a more constructive and innovative way to have this power, expanded to a greater community. And I think the best part of doing ESG is basically we can always think bigger and think longer and always be consistent and have perseverance. This is something that I'm very drawn to, because the practice of being a PR also requires me to have all those kind of good qualities to make things happen, to make a difference happen. So
Yep.
I don't, literally speaking, I don't think there is a hiccup. Basically, it's a global hiccup on the ESG. I'm very optimistic about this. And here in China, I want to share with you as well. It's basically there are so many more people are really caring about these topics, but most of the professionals, they don't know how to tag along with this kind of trend. So there are a lot of training, seminars, workshops, and also the governments are actually doing a lot of things to encourage at least the listed companies and public companies to be part of this venture. And as I said, that there are so many people, so many attention, there are bad people trying to make quick money. But what
Yeah.
I'm very happy about is actually within the ESG world, people who have really good, ethic levels, who are really good professionals, they don't fall into this kind of, quick money um,
Yeah.
issues. And we stick really, really move forward with some constructive ways.
Yeah, I agree fully with that, but I think what I've seen with the polarization and the rising nationalism and so much of going on in the world right now is there's room for both sides to kind of accept a little bit of responsibility for where we are and
Mm,
say, let's just move toward the middle more. And by that, I mean, I agree. We have colleagues that we've worked with that we're proud to know as colleagues that we respect, and they are the real deal. But I think we need to actually do a little bit more pause and listening right now. And instead of throwing out solutions and slogans and funding different things, maybe we just kind of listen and see where we are right now. For example,
mm,
I say this respectfully. I mean, I interned at the International Atomic Energy Agency when I was in college. I don't I don't believe that the UN is purpose built today for what it was. I don't believe
mm,
the World Economic Forum is, and nor should it be, as important as it once was, because it's clubby. And here we are. I
mm,
think a lot of the great philanthropies in the world are doing great work, but I wonder, do they really want radical change, or they kind of want to not put themselves out of business? So I don't have the answer. I don't mean to judge. I'm just saying I think we need to be a little bit more self-critical and say, oh,
hmm.
how, where are the young people in this movement? How are we bringing
Yeah.
them into the World Economic Forum? Or how are we letting dissent be communicated from Saudi Arabia to China to New York City? Clearly, it took us all to get where we are right now. So I say to people at this point in time in the US, don't put any, I say good money after bad money, but by which I mean, don't throw more money after a political candidate, a political party, a newspaper subscription, a nonprofit. Just sit right now and be with this right now. Because I strongly believe we do not have a silver bullet to get us where we need to get through polarization and things. And I believe that the leader is in our midst, but we do not know who the leader, or the leaders, I should say, are.
Mm,
And like post President Xi and Trump, like the next generation, there are those that are supposedly anointed that will be, and there are those who we don't even know. But I think we just need to be right now and look inside ourselves and say, what can I do to deal with this, whether it's climate or
mm,
polarization or economic opportunity or food scarcity? We have so much more power and influence in our own local communities and families. And so that's where I really champion the basic abilities of any person to be a part of a
mm,
solution in a positive way forward. We can't, it's so easy to get depressed right now and think that, everything's going bad, but there's so much so great in the world right now. And
mm.
if you can just interact with your own local grocer or your own family members, I'm telling you, like I just taught this course today in AI for 56 nonprofits, and I've given them power and opportunity to but I showed them you have so many more tools to collaborate and find solutions and
Mm.
fundraising, capacity build. That is local. It's hyper local.
Yeah.
It's Hudson Valley. But boy, oh boy, I had them skipping out of there, and I knew it, and I could tell it, and it wasn't for money. And I said, if you want to give me an endorsement on my LinkedIn, great, but that's, I think, where we all have to look inside, as you do with this podcast, with the work you do and have done, and just keep the faith.
Yeah, of course. I totally agree with you. Is currently a lot of institutions that are born with a mission, with a purpose, are now fading because it's clubby. I'm part of the
Big
club as
time.
well because
Big time.
everybody wants to be part of the community. But what I'm sometimes frustrated about is actually these people, these powerful people, people with really, really great influence within their organization and within the industry. They try to make the conversation going for a longer time for themselves instead of giving the opportunities or share the opportunities with the younger generation. So it's kind of, by having a very exclusive club that we can keep this conversation a little bit longer, but to
Yep.
ignore somehow the real things that need to be changed.
And I'll tell you, like we have, I'm 62. I have friends my age, older, younger, who either by retirement or by forced, they've left their brands. It sucks to be laid off or put out of work. It happens. It happens perhaps more now than ever. Even with the younger people, I'm seeing people in their 20s
Mm,
laid off. But the point is, when you have that power, that authority, those funds, that ability to convene,
mm,
how much do you really try to be the change? And so I'll sound a little bit cynical here. I don't mean to be, but I have friends that once they got laid off from a major global publisher or a fashion company, now they're doing their leadership development, their consulting thing, their life coaching thing, and writing their book about, how to like stand up about. And I think, well, where the hell were you when you had the platform? And
Mm,
toot my own horn, but at Christie's, I didn't have to do the green auction or
yeah.
the bid to save the earth or engage with for. In fact, to the contrary, it was so much work internally to get the culture to say, I know this is not what we do, and I know there's not an infrastructure, but let's work on it. And with a lot of colleagues and a lot of great help, we did it. And it was lonely at times, right?
Mm,
But I wasn't I wasn't just like talking the talk. I was really delivering. And I will support my friends who have left brands and are now writing books
mm,
and trying to, be forces for good. I genuinely support that. But part of me, honestly, it says like a day late and a dollar short. Also, when did you get religion is the expression we use here. And I don't want to be negative like that, but I just think we need to be self-critical and look at ourselves and,
mm,
all right, well, what did I do? How am I hurting right now? And you know, empathy is in short supply sometimes. And go
mm,
back to the very specific, particular, you can walk out into your street in your town, and I can, and you're going to see a homeless person. You're going to see someone without affordable housing, and do you just look the other way? I choose not to, but I try to be practical about it.
mm.
I'll bring together leaders who are involved in different spaces who can actually locally make a difference in solutions for affordable housing, or like I did today with these nonprofits. But I just feel like we have all that we need to get through this. We just need leadership. And that
Yeah,
can
I
be
think
good.
that your book, The Caring Economy, talks a lot about leadership in this sector. And I want to ask you a very interesting question. So
Sure.
your book was officially published 5, 6 years ago. You've been an observer and you've been a very, active practitioner in this practice. What remained unchanged and what's new if you need to update your book?
I, I, actually, I think it's kind of evergreen. It's about leadership and purpose. And
Mm,
great brands are built from the inside out. They are mission driven, they have values, and everybody knows it and is held responsible and buys into it. You can't you can't fake caring. Because if
mm,
you do, your customers know it, your employees know it, it just falls flat. So I
mm,
don't, as I said earlier, like with this ESG blowback and charges of greenwashing, all that. I mean, I just posted something on LinkedIn this week that said, I think it's the Economist, I think, has an article out this week about where, you know, or maybe it was trade. Anyway, it was basically where what happened to the brands that were to do good and now they're not. And I I think that the brands that are mission driven, values led, and have actual authentic leadership, authentic is an overused word, they're fine. And
mm-hmm,
those that are flailing or changing midstream, they need to go out of business. Or I'm not going to defend them. I never did. My book talked about examples of like, I think in my book I talk about Ford and embracing breast cancer. Like Ford Automotive and cars and breast cancer were not the two things. That's not core to their mission. It felt to me like they're
mm,
pandering to women who they want to buy their cars. It's fine, but I contrast that with, for example, Legos, which I'll come back to Legos, but Legos at the time, what they've done with sustainability and all about engaging young people in creative
mm,
playing and building. And then
mm.
you know what? You take it apart and start all over again. Where I think it's gone a little too far now, you have these Lego stores all over the world, and they're creating these models that are so rococo and so difficult that the parents spend the money, they build it, and then they can't take it apart because it's like a work of art. So that's not about build it and destroy it and start over. So that to
Yeah.
me is just greed, right? And that goes against. So I guess to answer your question, if I were to write about Lego today, I think I would feel a little bit differently than I did then. It's more money and profit driven now than it is about purpose.
So basically, the caring economy story continues with your podcast. Tell us how many seasons you have produced so far.
Yeah, so this week is my 5th year anniversary. That's 19 seasons I've done. A season is anywhere from 10 to 15 or 16. I think we've got about 200 plus interviews under my belt.
Wow.
And it has been so fun and so joyful and easy. I mean,
Hmm.
easy in that I delight in conversations like the one you're affording me tonight. And think how privileged we are just to have lived the lives we live, work in the brands we do with the people we know, but also have the curiosity to go deep with
Hmm.
whoever we meet. And why not share that for those who want to know more, see more, hear more? And what's
Hmm.
particularly fun for me with the show is because I've committed to getting a diversity of voices and brands and geographies, I've
Hmm.
had I had Sally Sussman, who's a former colleague from Amex, but she's runs external affairs at Pfizer, talking to Sally about her brand and her life story at a time of COVID, working for Pfizer, one of the largest pharma companies. That's our
Hmm.
history. People will be able to go back 5, 10, 20 years from now and hear what Sally Sussman said at Pfizer at that point about these things, or Joe Evangelista at JP Morgan Chase. Or talking about what happened, where were you when George Floyd died, or where were
Yeah.
you when the world stopped and shut for COVID? So it's fascinating. I just had 2 weeks ago a guest. She's the U.S. commissioner, SEC commissioner for crypto, a Trump appointed regulator. She's been there 8 years. I'm interested in crypto. I'm dubious about it in many ways, but I can tell you when I had Hester Pierce on, this woman gave me such confidence in she's the right person for this job because she, like I, believes in regulation, but not.
Hmm.
And this administration right now leads people like me to think like, wow, like the fox is watching the chicken coop. It's like all bets are off. They're selling their own crypto coins and doing all these things. But Hester Peirce was an amazing regulator, and I felt great to have her on my show because right now crypto is only going to become more important. Um,
Hmm.
and so I get to go deep with anyone on any issue that I choose to. But the truth is, we can all do that. Like
Yeah.
you're doing that, right? So
I
think of how
I
many
I
other
do
things.
this.
Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
do this podcasting is basically you offered a very important interview to me, and I feel so relaxed, and because we have this level of trust that we know that we want to make this conversation insightful,
Yeah,
constructive, and to
absolutely.
have people to be aware of the things that they should be aware of. Sometimes it's not very cocky, it's not confidence, it's not condescending. It's basically share our conversation as friends, right, with the rest of the world. For
Yeah.
me, doing podcast is very rewarding because each show that I recorded, I edited, and I publish it, I find it I'm very fulfilled. I'm very rewarded because making this kind of quality content and also very in-depth discussions is sometimes making me feel more mission driven, and that makes
Absolutely.
you're literally making friends with like-minded people because of the podcast, because of the content you created. And also interviewing your friends or a friend of a friend always make you connect with these type of people and bring your friends even closer because everybody knows that this is going to somewhere better, some
Yeah.
way better. And I think this is why I embrace podcasts so much, and I find it extremely important for business leaders, professionals to have a third opinion or fourth opinion about their life because everybody is restrained with their own. Now we have the AI algorithms to control what you read, right? And you have your social networks contribute to a majority of content you follow. And now I think, the podcast always gives me a very fresh perspective about things that I should have known earlier, and always listening to podcasts is sometimes rewarding as I make them.
Absolutely. Well, I think that yes, these are friends often and they become friends, but I think also I would give you credit that you might not want to take, but you and I both are lifelong learners and educators. So it's not just about
Mm-hmm.
in a friend, to the contrary, it's not necessarily about being a friendly setting, but it's about learning and growing and then diffusing or sharing that knowledge. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's part of the mission of this in our jobs as communicators is to share knowledge, have dialogue, civil discourse to build toward an end, whatever that is. It could be a political campaign, it could be selling a brand. It's not so much that that matters, but how do you do it? How do you engage? And I I know I can go deep with anyone on a subway car, in a gala dinner, in a C-suite. Like we should give each other a little bit more credit, I think, for being curious and interesting people. But what happens is we're sort of dumbed down in society right now with social media and
Mm.
pop culture it has its place, but it's not necessarily the way forward. So I love that your show, my show are long format, right? It's not like sound bites, 10 seconds. I love having at least a half an hour to go deep. And while I don't believe in regrets in life, I realized during COVID, when I took my book and launched this podcast by the same name, that
Mm.
I missed or would have perhaps liked to have been a television talk show host.
Yeah.
So now I'm doing it. It's later
Yeah.
in life, but boy, the joy it gives me. And I can do it in my sleep now. And I have PR firms that you and I both know, like Apco and Edelman. They call me regularly to try and get their people on right now. So it suggests me at a minimum I should have a sponsor, right? But that's a sign of arriving, I think, and that you're doing something that's meaningful. Plus, I have, 30,000 on my LinkedIn that see it, and I have 3,800 subscribers to my newsletters, and I'm promoting different ways. But if I can use my podcast, my position to engage people on ideas and thoughts and
Hmm.
solutions and higher purpose, I'm gonna die a happy man. I mean, it's just this is what it's about, I think. It's about service. And that's what great journalists do. That's what you've done with your career. That's what you do with the show.
Mm.
And that's the last point I'd make, Jiming, is with my show, I want to demystify leadership.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
believe that I believe as a gay man, I believe, and same thing with leadership, that we're partly nurture, partly nature, right?
Mm.
So leadership, everyone has leadership skills, everyone has their gender identities, but nature and nurturing will shape you in certain ways. So if I can use my podcast, the first half I typically took, as you've done tonight, like where did you come from? How did you grow? Like how did you get where you got, basically? So
Yeah,
you demystify that nobody got where they got by themselves. People had
yeah.
mentors, pivots, and failures. And I love going there and demystifying it. And then the latter half is, so what are you doing with your position and your brand? How are you stewarding your brands through COVID or Iran or George Floyd? And that I think is a huge contribution to anyone, anywhere, because it helps them realize, oh, people are people, and I have leadership potential or skills, and I can be a part of a solution or not. And I love the thought that I could empower people, particularly because of the diversity of guests that I've had, to see themselves in my podcast and then go forth and lead.
For me, it's like I totally agree with you. And for me, doing podcast, I don't know if you share the same type of feeling as I do. It's actually we are not artists. We are like the curators and we like the
Absolutely.
collectors. It's like that I'm putting together a gallery of the artist piece that I enjoy most and I want to own it. And as a PR person, as a conversation facilitator, the best way to reserve or to own this art is actually to have the artist paint for you. And your show becomes a gallery of wonderful ideas, of wonderful people. And sometimes as a creator and as a host and producer of the podcast, you are the creator of an art show. And people are willing to come in and pick whatever they want to observe and to enjoy.
Well, absolutely. You're the curator, but also I think, again, take the compliment. One, you are driven by, as a journalist, as a you are a host, you are driven by curiosity. Like
Mm,
if you see a 3-year-old that's curious about the world, they're gonna be all right. Like you want people
yeah.
to have curiosity. And right now we're suffering, I think, in a lot of kids and adults are not given the inspiration, the challenge, the motivation to be curious about the world around them, to be curious about the other. It's a lot easier to just swipe left, swipe right, get in our little echo chamber and zone in and binge watch something. But the other thing is, I think, you say curate art and conversation that you like, but I think you do so much more, and I try to do the same, which is to invite others on that journey, right? Like saying it's my way is the only way. What you're saying is this is a beginning of a conversation. Like, let's talk about ideas and where do we go and how do we grow and how do we evolve? So you're not saying, to your credit, you're not hermetically sealed in your own little world. It's not an echo chamber. To the contrary, you have me coming in as the English speaking American. You've got all these different folks. And I think that you lead by example. Honestly, you do.
Duty as charged. And thank you so much, Toby, because you are an inspiration for me as well. What I like about, having this kind of conversations with the friends across the world is basically, I think, although we have a Pacific Ocean in between us and also has the entire US continent, North American continent between us, the good part is actually, I think, although we come from different cultural backgrounds, we have different career paths, but we believe in the same thing. And these type of issues are actually universal that should be, understood by the majority of the population on this planet. And I think these type of value or ethics or any, professional best practices should be understood and should be recreated in different communities. As you said, that we need to go local, but sometimes, these globally proven best practices really, really need to have a local point of view. And also the local people need to draw inspiration from people elsewhere that we share the same mission. We are like-minded people that we want to really, really make change happen with limited resources or even without resources. That, these type of conversations should be going on, and this type of conversations should be cross-cultural, should be international, and should be, even cross-generational, right?
Yeah. And maybe you don't, going back to what I said earlier about World Economic Forum and UN, maybe challenging myself in that sort of self-criticism, maybe you and I should think about creating a digital sort of jamboree where we can invite anyone and any one of our listeners or audience who want to. We need to think about what it looks like, but we don't need Davos or Coachella to, bring people together to talk about challenges and solutions and opportunities. But particularly young people, I think if you give them an invitation to come and structure to have, like it could be a 3-hour seminar, it could be a brainstorm. I don't know what it is, Jiming, but you and I think both appreciate what we've built together, but we're also honest and old enough to say, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here to help bring together and explore things with some boundaries, because that's where it's going to get exciting. And
sometimes I find
inherit the earth.
Yeah, I want to share you with some exciting initiatives I'm working on top of the China-US, relationship building, especially from the private sector and especially from the people level. I really, really wanted to make this ESG thing happening within the younger generation. So I know UNESCO and other UN agencies are actually having a lot of similar courses or online trainings for younger generation. They are working with the education departments in different countries to make this happen. But what I see is actually there are so many stakeholders in this. And also we need a centralized or global mission, but we also need decentralized and localized mission. So sometimes I've been working on is actually I wanted to bring really environmental scientists or scientists to train. A lot of financiers are actually trained as scientists. And so why don't we have a hybrid event that can make ESG education more accessible to the younger generation? It is not necessarily a field trip or community service work, but it is a workshop that we present to the younger generation that these things can be happening, but we need to have a very focused, solution providing mechanism that we need to offer them, that these mechanisms exist. So that's why I think, later this year, we will establish the Asia Pacific sustainability youth leadership initiative. So I think this conversation could be transcontinental. This could be cross-cultural. But the ESG topic, although there are hiccups and blowbacks, but definitely we need to have this conversation moving forward. But how can we make this happen? The initiative should be thriving on its own and also should be financially sustainable as well. So I think by offering very high quality educational sessions and also workshops with the younger generation can not only give people like what you and I an opportunity to engage with the younger generation, but also to present them that there are systematic approaches that can have these problems resolved. And you have 35, 50, 30, 50, even 80 years to do so. And I think this is kind of a torch passing or torch relay initiative that a lot of people from the previous generations or people with legacies, with resources can really, have this power relayed to the younger generation. This is something that I find most exciting about ESG education for the young youth leadership.
I love that, and I'll help however I can, but I would also suggest it might be fun to reverse engineer that, by which I mean you've heard about, I think, reverse mentoring. So it's the kids who teach the CEO. It would have, as a prelude, it would just be interesting to organize perhaps a WeChat session with 50 young people from around the world. By young, I mean like 14 to 20, to talk about ESG education. But rather than call it ESG education, just ask them like, all right, here's the problem. The world's melting. We're all going to die. And what's the solution? And instead of saying ESG this or whatever, and you'd pick people, invite people who you think have formed some views and are, responsible and care. But I think there's, just saying ESG education, you already limit yourself to who's going to be receptive to that message, how they're going to receive it. But there could be an artist in Zimbabwe. There could be a 19-year-old kid in the Bronx who cares desperately about the reality, but hasn't ever been considered as someone whose point of view matters. And I don't think that has to be, it doesn't have to, well, that's what Greta was, right? When she became the activist in Sweden, but there are lots of Gretas out there, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think it's fun and easy to have an invitation to 50 people to be on a Zoom or a WeChat about what would you envision a convening like this being? You're not giving them the keys to the car, but I think there's only good things to be gleaned from that.
I have a lot of things going on in my mind, and there is a to-do list because you mentioned about, across the Pacific, there are conversations need to be forged. And, we are always the person, like the, super connector, as I mentioned, as a PR trained by our nature is actually to connect people. I think, by having a summit, something like World Economic Forum, but for the next generation is a very exciting project for me. And also for a lot of people, I think, there needs to be institutionalized efforts because we want to have this brand or have this platform going on forever and without losing the momentum or losing the focus. Because that's what we see is as long as you move forward, you bring your party to a larger crowd, sometimes people get distracted. But, sometimes it's mission driven. And how can we keep this as inclusive as possible? But sometimes exclusivity makes things better. So I think there is a fine balance between that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's keep talking about this later, but I'll give you a quick example where I think maybe it doesn't have to be inclusive in a group. It could be a constellation of different things. And I'm thinking specifically about social media, more specifically TikTok. I had a guest on my show 2 weeks ago, Walt Dabney, who at one point was the chief park ranger of the United States. Big job. Ooh. And then he became, when he retired, he's from Texas. He ran the state parks of Texas. Now he's 89 years old and he is regularly traveling the country. And he calls himself a preacher because he's advocating for all of America's public lands. Our public lands are our national parks, the Bureau of Land Management, the Fish and Wildlife Properties, monuments. All these things are the American people that own it. And the only one that can open it up or sell it or do it for drilling, mining, all that, the only authority is with the Congress. But an 18-year-old, 19-year-old doesn't necessarily realize that these are our public lands. And so Walt has all these great interviews on public radio and the New York Times where he speaks about it, but he's 9. He does not want to have staff. He doesn't want to make money. He just wants to get the message in front of young people that you have a vote. These are your lands. And so I've gotten 3 young women that just finished their freshman year at college and want their summer internship in sustainability and things. Long story short, they've launched on TikTok at Ranger Walt and on Instagram at Ranger Walt. And we are building his profile with his content to showcase or educate people about the public lands, but then also the call to action is talk to your Congress people, like you have this vote. But the funny thing, Xiaoming, is parallel to all this, you know how it is on social media, these things are going viral. There's so many different things happening right now with the parks around the country that are kids are stepping up, they're getting involved. So we're not picking one over the other. All we're doing is having Walt as Ranger Walt, the old guy, saying, I'm giving a shout out to this Yellowstone approach or this African-American parks enthusiast things. So we're growing the traffic for, the plan is grow the traffic for Ranger Walt and raise awareness for America Public Lands through social media with these young people. Let them drive it. Let them run with it and doing it. So that idea of a constellation of different movements, maybe it's not about having a World Economic Forum convening, but maybe it's about having a template that says a hashtag even that says, all right, like this is what ESG means to us, but just make sure you do hashtag ESG, whatever you do. But as long as it's advocating for social justice, governance, the environment, go for it. Use your social media and see what you can do. I think it's another way to look at this. It's not
centralized. It's more organized, orchestrated. I totally understand you because you mentioned the word hashtag, put a hashtag there. You know, the beauty of doing PR is actually there is a theory that it has been proven to be successful, a couple of times during campaigns. Is actually the crystalling of messaging, right? We always need to have a hashtag at the start of everything. And the things will go viral and the things will happen naturally because there is public opinion, there is social attention, there are, even geopolitical dilemma in this. So I think there's, I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I want to bring the attention to my followers and also the followers of the Caring Economy podcast. This is literally what's going on between me and Toby. Every time if there is an opportunity that we sit down or we pick up on the phone or we have a conversation, things will pop up. And these new initiatives are longstanding, mission-driven, and rewarding, not in a financial way, but in a really, really, I don't know how to describe it, but this is what exactly happened with this, type of person. So thank you, Toby, for joining me on my podcast. And I think we should keep this conversation going. And I think our conversation as PR practitioners, we can make this public without, screening, because we always know what to say and what to, hit the points, etc. So do you want to say anything to conclude today's podcast, Toby?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shay. I would say 2 thoughts. One is that we also land things when we do them. We don't just get together and talk. Like you brought Wu Bin, who's with us today, who did the translation of my book into Chinese, and those proceeds all went to a nonprofit in China. And so it's not just about talk; it's about action and landing it. And the second thing is you're talking about hashtags. I'll go back to my answer earlier for you, Xiaoming. You are the answer. Hashtag the answer.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for friends across the world, especially for my followers here in China, this would be a very challenging show if you do not want to listen English that much, but we will try to use AI to make a translation available for all of you guys. But, trust me, 相信我, trust me, this show, if you listen to it, you will find it most rewarding. And Toby, I would like to book you another time for this session, and I will be so honored to rejoin your podcast because I have a lot to share about what's going on with ESG here in China and how Chinese people are combining the political agenda with ESG. That is something unique globally.
Absolutely. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye,
Toby.
Bye-bye.
以上就是本期节目的所有内容。如果你对于我们的讨论感兴趣，欢迎加入我们的听友群。可持续对话，让对话可持续。我们下次再见。